In this video, we're going to briefly summarize the production decisions for a competitive firm and also consider the conditions under which this firm may choose not to produce anything, that is, to shut down. Let's begin with our summary of what we've discussed so far. As a competitive firm, the firm is a price taker. What that implies, as we mentioned earlier, is that the firm's marginal revenue will be equal to its price. It has no choice over what price it can charge. Therefore, every extra unit that it sells, the marginal revenue that it receives from that unit is exactly equal to the market price. The firm's objective is to maximize profit. And to maximize profit, what the firm will do is, by thinking on the margin, it will produce at the point where marginal revenue equals marginal cost. As a profit maximizing firm, any firm will use this decision rule to decide how much to produce. However, since marginal revenue equals price, for a competitive firm, it is also true that at the profit maximizing rate of output, price is equal to marginal cost. So we find the optimal quantity by looking to see where price equals marginal cost. So that will give the firm some quantity Q star. To see if the firm is making profit, is it making a profit or is it making a loss? At Q star, we compare the market price that the firm sees, compare that price to the firm's average cost of production at Q star. If the price is greater than the average cost at Q star, then the firm is making a profit. Then its profit is greater than zero. If the price is less than average cost at Q star, then the firm is losing money. It has economic losses. So this summarizes what we've talked about so far. But there is this other alternative we need to consider in the short run. And that is, well, if the firm is losing money, then perhaps it should shut down. And by shutting down, what we mean is that it chooses to produce a quantity of output equal to zero, and it will incur an economic loss. Why do we know that? Because its loss is going to be equal to the value of its fixed costs. In the short run, by definition, it must pay these fixed costs. There may be this alternative, though, that it's better to shut down than to lose money. And so what we want to do is summarize what that condition is. When should a firm shut down? That's the question. When should a firm shut down? When should a firm shut down? Basically, a firm should shut down if it cannot cover its variable costs. So if it cannot cover its variable costs, then it should shut down. And to see why this is so, let's remind ourselves the firm's objective is to maximize profit. Profit is equal to the firm's total revenue less its total cost. Total cost, that's equal to the firm's fixed costs less the firm's variable costs. Okay, so total cost equal to fixed costs plus variable costs. So if we subtract total cost from total revenue, we get total revenue less fixed cost less variable cost. Well, the firm has to pay the fixed costs no matter what. Whether it operates, whether it shuts down, it must pay those fixed costs. So when we're trying to make this decision about whether to produce or shut down, we can just treat the fixed costs as a sunk cost. So what's that mean? We can basically ignore those costs when we make this short-run production decision. So the firm will choose to operate if The total revenue it receives is enough to cover the variable costs. If its total revenue is at least enough to cover its variable cost. Alternatively, you can write that as follows. Total revenue, price times quantity, variable cost, that's going to be your average variable cost times quantity. Q's will cancel out. So this nicely simplifies to price is at least as great as average variable cost. If you choose to operate, if you choose to produce that quantity Q star is chosen by looking to see where price equals marginal cost. If you choose to produce that quantity, you should only choose to do that because at that quantity, the market price is at least enough to cover your average variable cost of production at that quantity. Otherwise, your best decision is to shut down. And shutting down implies that you are not making enough revenue to cover your variable cost, or alternatively, the price or the average revenue you receive per unit is less than the average variable cost per unit. And just to give you some intuition about this condition, remember in the short run, you already start in the hole before you start producing. You have to pay those fixed costs. So let's suppose for simplicity your fixed costs are equal to $100. So you're $100 in the hole. If you find that by producing at that quantity where price equals marginal cost, that your average variable cost exceeds your price, then that suggests that you are going to be driven even further into the hole. Not only are you not making enough to cover your fixed costs, but you're not making enough to cover the average variable cost of every unit of production. So you keep going further and further in the hole as you continue to produce more. So this summarizes the firm's short-run production decision. Either operate, and that would happen at the quantity where P equals marginal cost, otherwise you're best off just shutting down. So given our discussion on when a firm should choose to operate and shut down, we can go ahead and derive the market supply curve for the short run. So on this slide, on the left-hand side, we have a firm that is producing within this particular market. We're going to assume that this firm is one of many. There's 1,000 firms within this market and that they are all identical. And what we mean by that is that they all have a similar marginal cost curve and similar average variable cost curve. Their costs do not differ. At a given price, we're going to see that the amount of output within the market is going to be equal to the amount of output that this typical firm would produce at that price times 1,000. Why? Because there's 1,000 identical firms who would choose to produce that same quantity of output. So let's give an example to see how we derive the short-run market supply curve. Consider the price of P1. At a price of P1, the firm will set that price equal to marginal cost and choose to produce 10 units. Notice that it will choose to produce versus shutting down because at 10 units, the price is enough to cover the firm's average variable cost, which happens to also be equal to the value of P1. So if this one firm is producing 10 units at that price, that means collectively all 1,000 firms are producing 10,000 units. To map out the supply curve, let's consider another price, P2. At P2, this representative firm will set that price equal to marginal cost and choose to produce 20 units. That means collectively all 1,000 firms will choose to produce 20,000 units. Consider one more price, a price of P3. Set P3 equal to marginal cost. The firm will choose to produce 30 units, and collectively the market will choose 30,000. If we continue to consider alternative prices, we would go through the similar exercises. But what we have done here on the right-hand side is we have mapped out the market short-run supply curve. So now you have some idea about how the supply curve for the market is determined in the short run.